Let's look at the innate immune system first. As previously mentioned, the innate immune response is rapid, which does not require activation, but is something that you are born with. Any invader that breaches the physical barrier of skin or mucosa is greeted by the innate immune system, our second line of defense. Immunologists call this system innate because it is a defense that all animals just naturally seem to have. As we have seen, the cells of immunity exist in all organisms. They are called innate or natural because they are present before infection, although the amount of some components may increase following an infection. Innate immunity is activated when cells use specialized sets of receptors to recognize different types of pathogens. Binding to these receptors activates a limited number of basic microbial disposal mechanisms, such as phagocytosis. Let's talk about the components of the innate system, one by one, so you can understand its mechanism of working easily. External barriers are also called physical barriers. Internal barriers are also called physiological barriers, cellular fighters. First, we will go through the physical barriers. Body components that act like physical or external barriers are: skin is the first line of defense against any foreign organism and pathogen. Many pathogens can penetrate the skin, either via the bite of a vector or by invasion through intact skin. The skin provides a physical barrier, with secreted sebum and fatty acids inhibiting bacterial growth. Such as oil helps the skin by making it supple so there are no cracks, and the first barrier is not compromised. Even hair act as a barrier against foreign invaders, such as the hair in your ear, nose, or head. Another important barrier is the normal flora. It refers to the microorganisms that live on other living organisms' host, without causing disease. Bacterial cells forming part of the normal flora outnumber human cells in the body. The normal flora protects by competing with pathogens for colonization sites and producing antibiotic substances, bacteriocins, that suppress other bacteria. The skin flora has staphylococci, streptococci, corynebacterial bacterial, and yeasts. Antibiotics suppress normal flora, which allows colonization and infection by naturally resistant organisms, such as Candida albicans. Antibiotics may upset the balance between organisms of the normal flora, allowing one to proliferate disproportionately. Mucous membrane. Present throughout the body. A healthy mucous membrane is essential to fight against invading pathogens. The most important places where the healthy mucous membrane is essential are the conjunctiva, respiratory tract, gastrointestinal tract, urinary tract, and reproductive tract. In the respiratory tract, mucociliary clearance mechanisms protect the respiratory tract. Air is humidified and warmed as passes through the nasal sinuses. Any particles that enter settle on the sticky mucus of the respiratory epithelium, and debris is then transported by the cilial conveyor belt to the oropharynx, where it is swallowed. As a result, only particles with a diameter of less than 5 micrometer reach the alveoli, so the respiratory tract is effectively sterile below the carina. Stomach acid. Low pH damages pathogens, so there is no colonization in the gut. The use of antacids leads to acid suppression, which increases the risk of intestinal infection. Other external barriers are earwax, which blocks the entry of pathogens through the ear canal. Tears, sweat, and saliva all contain lysozymes that fight against microbes and create an unfavorable environment for pathogens. Moving on to the physiological or the internal barriers. The physiological barriers can be divided into inflammation, antimicrobials, complement. We will look at how these three processes contribute to the innate immune mechanism. Starting with inflammation. During the process of inflammation, water and white blood cells leak out of the blood vessels and enter the tissues. Thus, more fluid and white blood cells travel to the site of infection or injury. Cardinal symptoms of inflammation are redness at the site, warm, swelled plus pain. As for the These fatty acids, short chains, and peptides are made by WBC and the epithelial cells. They can disrupt the cellular integrity of a pathogen and alter its functions. Secreted antibacterial compounds include mucus, which contains polysaccharides of similar antigenic structure to the underlying mucosal surface. Organisms bind to the mucus and are removed. Other antibacterial compounds secreted by the body include lysozyme in tears and sweat, as mentioned before. Complement. Complement is a system of plasma proteins that collaborate to resist bacterial infection. They are activated by antigen-antibody binding or by direct interaction with the bacterial cell wall. After activation, they form a membrane attack complex. The complex punches a hole in the cell membrane of the pathogen and allows for fluid to enter the cell, that leading to cell lysis. The other function of the complement is that it enhances inflammation and phagocytosis, which is eliciting activation of macrophages at a higher rate. We will talk about the complement system in detail in another video. Now let's talk about the third component of the innate immune system, which is the cellular fighters. The cellular fighters, or simply the leukocytes involved in the innate immune response mechanism, are: leukocytes originate in the bone marrow. Antigen-presenting cells, such as macrophages or dendritic cells. Neutrophils are the most common leukocyte in human blood, a short-lived phagocyte cell whose granules contain numerous bactericidal substances. Neutrophils are the first cells to leave the blood and enter sites of infection or inflammation. Another cell known as the natural killer cell is also part of the innate immune response, as it does not require activation. It is a lymphocyte. They attack virally infected cells and tumor cells. Other cells such as basophils circulate in the blood and release histamine, a key mediator that causes inflammation. They contain large basophilic granules that contain heparin and vasoactive amines, important in the inflammatory response. Eosinophils are especially important in fighting off parasitic infected cells. Eosinophils is a leukocytes with large refractile granules that contain a huge number of highly basic or cationic proteins, possibly important in killing larger parasites, including worms. Mast cells underlay in the mucous membrane. It is a large tissue cell derived from the circulating basophil. Mast cells are rapidly triggered by tissue damage to initiate the inflammatory response, which causes many forms of allergy. Variation in the expression or composition of each component affects an individual's resistance to infection. Let's look into the details of 3-star players of the innate immune response. Macrophages. One of the defender cells that is stationed in your tissues is the most famous innate immune system player of them all, the macrophage. Macrophages and all the other blood cells in your body are the descendants of self-renewing blood stem cells. When it encounters a bacterium, a macrophage first engulfs it in a pouch, vesicle, called a phagosome. The vesicle containing the bacterium is then taken inside the macrophage, where it fuses with another vesicle termed a lysosome. Lysosomes contain powerful chemicals and enzymes which can destroy bacteria. This whole process is called phagocytosis. Usually, macrophages can deal with small attacks. However, when invaders are numerous, macrophages risk being overpowered, and in those cases, macrophages call for backup. The most common reinforcement for battling macrophages is a cell called a neutrophil. Indeed, although the macrophage is unmatched in versatility, the most important of the professional phagocytes is probably the neutrophil. Neutrophils live for a very short time. They come out of the bone marrow programmed to die in an average of about 5 days. In contrast to macrophages, neutrophils are not antigen-presenting cells. Once they have been summoned, it only takes neutrophils about half an hour to exit the blood and become fully activated. In this state, neutrophils are incredibly phagocytic. Neutrophils also produce battle cytokines that can alert other immune system cells. And most importantly, activated neutrophils give off destructive chemicals, which are pre-made and stored inside the neutrophil until needed. Natural killer cells. There is another important player in the innate immune system team, which can help defend against a viral infection: the natural killer NK cell. Natural killer cells mature in the bone marrow, and when they are not responding to an infection, are short-lived, with a half-life of only about a week. Most NK cells are found in the blood or the spleen and liver, and relatively few NK cells reside in tissues that are not under attack. So, like neutrophils, natural killer cells are mostly on call. Once in the tissues, they proliferate rapidly to build up their numbers. When they reach the battleground, natural killer cells can play two roles in defending us against infections. First, NK cells can give off cytokines such as IFNG that help with the defense. Natural killer cells can destroy some tumor cells, virus-infected cells, bacteria, parasites, and fungi. They kill these cells by forcing them to commit suicide. Collectively, the two types of barriers that we have discussed and the cellular fighters work together to initiate the innate immune response.